recognize Representative Leila Staffler.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, colleagues, for sharing your impassioned insights into this very important issue of our budget. I would like to speak about the Senate version, Section 501, regarding the reprogramming authority that was deleted. A new language was inserted regarding the retiree 25%. They're using this. They're using the 25%, the retiree 25%, as justification for why we need to give this governor reprogramming authority. But I want to think about that a little bit more. Basically, it says that the governor may reprogram sufficient funds from the operations and activities of departments, agencies, and offices of the executive branch to fund any shortfalls of the retiree 25% pension benefits and the payment of retirees' death benefits. My first question would be, what would be considered sufficient funds when operational funds were still zero funded in the Senate's version, which pretty much echoed the governor's version of this budget? We've also heard from agencies during the House budget sessions that they were supposed to rely on the remaining balances. That's what David Atzeleg told us when he came in to speak. But when we spoke to each agency during the House budget hearings, agency after agency told us that they were running out of their ARPA allocations. In fact, I've even been told that there are some municipalities that are telling their agency heads, spend it all now. There would be no rollover if that's the case. And what would those agencies do? They would need additional operation funds for next fiscal year. As the legislature, knowing this, we could not act. We could not leave that as is. We had to make sure that we tried to find not just the 25% for our retirees, but also operational budgets for all the agencies. In Title I, in the Commonwealth Code, also in Section 7204D, it says that funds for operations shall be appropriated pursuant to annual appropriation acts. And so this governor also failed to do that, plain and simple. And the Senate is just allowing it by keeping the numbers as they are. What was included in the Senate substitute bill, HB 22116, is to fund the retiree 25% and Medicaid match. This is in Section 705, Part D. It says, under the offices of the governor, Business Unit 1951, Medicaid reimbursements, the Secretary of Finance shall reserve $7.2 million of FEMA community disaster loan to fund the local Medicaid match. Now note, for Medicaid match, we need to find $7.2 million. For the retirees, we need to find $13 million. This leads to my second question. How can we use the CDL to fund the retiree 25% and Medicaid match as proposed by this governor? I ask because one of the documents that this committee subpoenaed was the CDL fund status. And if you look here, which I will share this with the media after, you can see clearly there isn't enough money to pay both the retiree 25% and Medicaid match. And this amount is only for the first quarter, not even for the entire whole year. And so when you look at the remaining balance of CDL as given to us by the Secretary of Finance, there's less than $37,000. And that only accounts for the retiree 25% for the first quarter. It doesn't do anything for the second, the third, or the fourth quarter. Nor does it address what the Senate was intending, that this amount of money is supposed to cover the Medicaid match. It doesn't even come close. Now, furthermore, the Senate version only funds the retiree 25% for the first quarter. And the language that I quoted at the start was intended to give the governor reprogramming power to find the remaining funds. As many of our colleagues have shared, how is this different from what the House intended to do? Reprogramming funding to cover the 25%, to cover operations, to cover Medicaid match. These are all the things that this House prioritized, every single member from the majority to the minority. Now, this governor wants to have absolute control over federal funding sources and tries to argue that this is how it is, even in the states. But we know that it is not true. The Senate even showed a slide at their press conference earlier this afternoon that contradicts this argument. 6 or 12% of ARPA funding, 6 states or 12% of the states The ARPA funding is solely decided by the legislature. 34 legislatures, or 64%, which is more than half, share joint decision-making with the executive. Only 8 or 16% of states have the sole expenditure authority in the executive branch. Now, the thing about this governor and even the Senate is that they throw out a lot of numbers and funding sources, and it confuses people. I don't blame you. Rep Probst, I'm just like you. I get confusing too. During the Senate press conference today, they shared that 20 million of the Medicaid that was going to be returned had already been spent by the administration during the second stimulus. Now, they throw this all out, but they forget that we can Google and look at the timelines. Now, this second stimulus was given out in June, okay? June of 2022. This issue of 20 million additional funding from Medicaid was not brought to our attention until August. How could they spend and give us a stimulus from this money that they didn't even know existed yet? According to Medicaid generated report, the CNMI didn't return that 20 million to the central government until September 7th. September, June, July, August, September, 4 months after they said they already spent the money, but they didn't know they had the money yet. How could that $20 million have covered the stimulus distributed in June? So what it comes to me is, my third question is, why wouldn't ARPA be available? Unless there's no ARPA in the bank that they are telling us. Based on what happened with the 20 million in Medicaid that was spent in June, even though Medicaid didn't inform them yet, we're spending money that they didn't even have. And this is alarming. This is why transparency is so important, and how can we as legislative body be in charge of balancing a budget when we don't have the information we need? I yield for now, but there's so much. Thank you.